Fred Buzzers, good morning.
Morning.
Let's all take a breath.
Good night.
Let's sit here and talk about performance art. Let's all breathe a little bit, okay?
Hey, I'm just happy my house is not underwater. I've evacuated from Hurricane Florence,
That's right.
drove up to Northern Virginia.
So that thing gone now? I heard it went down a tropical storm, right? And that's
It's North Carolina. There are parts of North Carolina and South Carolina that are underwater right now.
Yeah.
oh,
And the front page of the newspaper was just like, it looks like a lake down there.
wow.
So it's definitely still bad, but not where I live in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Fortunately.
It's incredible what nature can do, man.
Yeah, I actually took all my
Feels
instruments,
small.
all my stuff, books off the bottom shelves of bookcases. I took all my instruments and put them on a bed, and I took all my important stuff up here with me. And for anybody who's got important instruments, don't wait until there's a storm to try to get the valuable personal property insurance. Do it before. It's like a pre-existing condition. They're like, we would love to add this stuff to your insurance policy, but it's confirmed that the hurricane's coming towards you, so we can't insure it.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I was like, fine.
What was this? What was this interesting story you said you had when you texted us?
Oh, well, so I don't know. I was thinking about metal, and it's lots of European. I think of Scandinavians listening to metal, but I was out in Truckee or in Lake Tahoe, California for this wedding last weekend, and I went into this cool little bookshop, and I was looking through the shelves, and I saw this book called Blitzed, Drugs in the Third Reich. I remembered it's by Norman Ohler. He's a story writer.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I
Perfect.
remembered hearing an interview of the author on NPR, and I was like so struck by what he was saying, that it kind of blew me away, and I wrote the name of this book down. And when I saw it in the store, I had to get it, and I've really had a hard time putting it down. Because
what's it about?
So, in short, like a mini version here, after World War I, Germany was, the morale was down,
right?
The economy was down.
Right.
People there was this huge
crushed them.
Yeah, and they were using a lot of heroin and cocaine and opium, and Hitler and his gang came along in the early 30s and kind of tried to stomp that out, and they were making it illegal to marry if you were caught using drugs. They were making people rat on their families. They were even going so far as to castrate, put them into concentration camps. So then the pharmaceutical companies come up with this thing called methamphetamine. They called it Pervitin. And they put it on the market as a pill, and they basically marketed it like super coffee. Like they were lighter doses.
Right.
And the whole, while the Nazis are cracking down on all the other drugs, nobody really knew that Pervitin was that bad, or meth. And everybody started using it. Like the medical students, the doctors, they were giving it out to the doctors, free samples. Everybody started using it and being like, oh, I feel awake, I feel good. And so the whole German population started using it. And even Hitler himself started there's a doctor who started giving him vitamin injection.
Wow, that's crazy.
And so the whole German population and Hitler, everybody's getting addicted to meth, essentially. And then the military got a hold of it, and they were issuing the soldiers meth so they wouldn't fall asleep. And they could march for 3 days straight.
That I did hear of. Right. I remember listening to that, and
it's crazy. It changed the course of history. They lost their humanity, and they lost they were able to march through the mountains and blitzkrieg, whatever. They were able to surprise the French to the west. It was just wild that they were able to use drugs in war, and it really changed the course of the war.
That's crazy.
So anyway, I thought that was my interesting thing of the weekend. I wanted to use that as some way to get into death metal.
I have a great segue for that. So here we go. So Metallica wrote a song called Blitzkrieg.
Oh, there you go.
On the Kill 'Em All record, right,
Yep.
Aaron?
Yep.
And I remember being like, well, I was probably 12 when I heard that out for the first time, and I heard that track, and I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. It's so cool, you know. And that was like actually Sabbath for me was the first metal band I was into, but Metallica, I'd have to say, was really the gateway.
Yeah.
Band. Would you say the same thing? Aaron?
Yes, very much so. As soon as I heard One, it was all over.
Was that your first exposure to them? Was One?
Yeah. Yep. And Justice for All was the first album that I had.
I would say that's probably right. That's a really interesting record.
Yeah, I just watched an interview with Jason talking about actually, and I also listened to the producer engineer about Justice for All and how
they dropped him out of the mix.
They dropped him out of the mix
because they're all pissed off.
Yeah,
that he had to replace Cliff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. What I found interesting about Injustice, if you get a chance to listen to that record, Joe, I think it has one of the most iconic kick drum sound, you know, on any metal record. I'm not sure how Aaron agrees because I know
for that time. Yeah.
It was interesting, right? Just the kind of the clicky kind of sound it produced.
Yeah.
For that period. And Lars was like really doing some interesting footwork on that record, which I don't think afterwards he really hit.
No, they
went a different direction after Injustice.
What
Black
Rock? I mean, let's sell out.
What year was Injustice?
90. Was it 90? No. The Black Album was in the
89.
89.
Okay. What were you gonna say, Aaron?
In terms of like the drums. He definitely had a certain sound that was going on. Justice was more meter based, and they were definitely playing with time signature, and there was definitely less melodic. They definitely had some like 9-minute long songs on there, so they were exploring length of song. But in terms of comparing it to Master of Puppets,
what was a different record?
Yeah, it was two completely different bands almost.
Well, that's Cliff. It was really Cliff. I mean, on Master, you know, Cliff's influences and knowledge of harmony was so prevalent. And then when you get to Injustice, you know, even James would say on interviews, like he was trying to replicate what he learned from Cliff, you know, on Injustice. But if you listen really closely on Injustice, there are little moments, right, where Cliff sneaks through.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You hear it, especially on "Is It to Live Is to Die?" I think in the opening, you know, and then that sort of interlude section. I mean, that's Cliff, you know,
Why did Cliff leave? Or
he died. He was on tour bus accident on the Master of Puppets.
They hit a patch of ice and the bus rolled over on top of him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment for those guys.
Yeah. Was he 27?
The magical 27.
I don't know. It's interesting. I never thought about that if he was.
Yeah. For all of those who don't know what 27 is, all famous musicians have a tendency to die when they're 27 years old.
Yeah. So if you make it past 27, you're safe.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Well, like Jimi Hendrix,
Janis Joplin.
Morrison? Was Morrison 27? Was he part of that too?
I don't know. I don't know.
I for some reason I always remembered it. Maybe it was like that whole Mandela effect thing where it's like false memory or whatever. But yeah. Well, anyway, Metallica, they were like, for me, it was funny before the show started, Joe and I were talking about death metal. And when Taylor does come on, I want to explore death metal because for me, I think metal was an interesting, in my own personal experience, was an interesting progression of study for me. But I didn't really get into what I think metal is until Aaron introduced me to death and death metal, you know, like when I was in my 20s, because as I said to Joe earlier, I think death metal is the one genre of metal that is physically powerful. Like just sonically speaking, like in physical space, you actually feel it.
Yeah.
You feel it in your body, just the frequencies. It's incredible. I've never experienced anything like it before. Even like heavy bands like Metallica, Megadeth, when we've seen those guys live, they're great artistically. They're great, but just death metal just has just a thing about it.
Yeah.
It's got force, power.
There's an energy to death metal that is unlike any other. It's pretty amazing performing that kind of stuff and how much energy it actually takes. It's crazy how much like you have to be on. And with metal, it's the personality of a metal person is they've got this OCD kind of quality to them where everything has to be perfect. There's hardly, I'm not going to say that there isn't, because there's definitely your fair share of sloppy players out there within the metal genre. But for the most part, I would probably say that they have this anal tendency to be like tight, especially as you get into those, um, death metal and thrash metal. Well, not so much thrash metal, because there's definitely room for error in there, but nonetheless, it's just the speed and pure power and brutality, and it's just it's incredible.
I was talking to Joe about Gene Hoglan. The Atomic Clock. That's a good example of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean, he's just like, holy crap.
Yeah. Human is a wonderful album. It's a great album.
Who was the drummer on that? I think Hoglan was on. He started on Individual Thought Patterns.
That was Individual.
And then he was on Symbolic, which is my favorite death record.
Yeah.
But I know you're more about Human, right? That
was my first death album.
Yeah, which is different than any other. I mean, that was like in fact I listened to that album a couple of days ago. I was listening to Flattening of Emotions.
I was just going to say the opening track, Flattening of Emotions, is just like,
well, it's a good representation of what death metal is. If you listen to that record, or at least that opening track.
Yeah.
And Chuck was doing some interesting stuff that whole way through that. And he was experimenting with.
I still remember analyzing Chuck's stuff and going through all of the death stuff and finding out that he did like an A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. That was his structure.
Correct.
And almost every single song was that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see how some of these guys structure their songs and the patterns that they kind of go through. But yeah, Death was definitely, one of the going from Metallica. I mean, there was definitely a transition period going from Metallica to Death. There was a lot of different bands that I'd listened to. But yeah, Death was like my first experience into actual true metal. Whether it was like Meshuggah or Opeth is another one that's just one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, we were talking about those guys earlier.
They came out with a double concept album where one album is pure, just straight up metal, and the other one is all actually acoustic.
Damnation.
Damnation. So it's really interesting, some of these guys and what they actually can do within metal. There's just so many bands out there, and it's expanded. I mean, from when the early days of metal, when it was just Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer, Anthrax and Suicidal,
MOD.
Yeah,
remember those guys?
Yeah. I mean, so from that and how it's kind of morphed into all these subgenres, and now we have things like gent and whatnot like that. Metal has gotten much bigger. It's kind of interesting.
You guys like Iced Earth? One of those guys.
I've seen them live.
I've never heard of
them. I like them.
Yeah,
they're recent.
Yeah, me and a couple of guys used to go out to Milwaukee. There was a place called the Milwaukee Metal Fest, and it was like one of the biggest metal shows, at least back then. And I saw all the metal bands out there. And actually, a friend of mine at the time had press passes, and we went backstage and met Cradle of Filth and Meshuggah, Death, all that kind of stuff. So it was very cool.
I think one of the things that the general public who does, okay, let's put it this way, the non-metal musician fans have to understand is that there is a degree of complexity in metal music that takes a lot of skill, like you were saying, to command, right? And I think, having studied the metal genre and looking at, like you just said, like how Chuck Schuldiner was doing, like cyclical sort of structures and different things, and just the harmonic, like doing things in fifths and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that takes a lot of skill and practice. Meshuggah, Frederick Thornthal, right? Fan of Holdsworth.
Yeah.
Studied Holdsworth intensely, right? And if you listen to a lot of Meshuggah solos, it's Alan.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
And he does a pretty good job of emulating those kind of leads and those legato lines. I mean, I listen to Frederick play, I'm like, holy shit, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, all of them are. I mean, it's like I said, it's hard to play within that genre and kind of not be on your best game. I was listening to a podcast last night, the Ultimate Recording Machine, and they had a 2.5-hour interview with Chris Adler of Lamb of God.
Lamb of God, yeah.
And The Machine, their producer. Great interview in terms of, you know, the metal scene and what is expected once you go in the studio and how they approach it. And, you know, they were talking about how there's kind of these two kind of ways of approaching music, and how you have the one person who, it was kind of funny, I was thinking about you, Tony, the one person who absolutely focuses in on their one thing, their guitar or instrument, and perfects that to the point of, you know, that's what I have to do. And then there's these other people who kind of do this multitasking of a bunch of other things, and each person needs, you know, each other to kind of make things work. So yeah, it's kind of interesting in terms of how these people, how metal bands, and I can't wait to talk to Taylor about this kind of stuff, and how the unit kind of works together and how they come up with their ideas, and where all that stuff comes from.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it, I think half of it is just like assimilating it through your influences. And then the other half, I think, is really like the experimentation part. I mean, it's funny, like we're talking about Taylor, when he comes on the show, I want to ask him this question too. But I remember seeing him live when he was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when he was one of our students, right? Or your students, I should say. And watching him perform in talent shows in school and emulating what death metal guys were doing. And the crowd, like, of high school students were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
They had no accessibility to it. And I'm watching him on stage, and I'm watching what he's doing, and it's like he's working it out on the guitar.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm wondering, like, where most metal guys come into the fold, because I didn't start out as a metal player. I came into it later.
It's kind of interesting. Two things come to mind. You know, there's I belong to a school where the main vision really is to take students and put them together in groups and make bands. That's the vision of our school. And we have a battle of the bands every year. And without fail, if there is a metal band within the mix, they win every single time. It doesn't matter if there was a group that was a pop group where they had 4-part harmony and it sounded absolutely amazing. If a metal band is present, they will win.
Why is that?
Energy, power. You can't forget it. You cannot walk away from that kind of experience and just kind of have it as an afterthought. It sticks with you.
I agree. It's in your bones.
Yes, it does.
The sound.
You are
in your bones.
Blown away by that pure power. Whether
brutality.
you're a fan or not, it doesn't matter. You're just like, wow, that was wow. Okay. And that ends up winning every single time. Now, the other thing that I was thinking of is that, because we may have listeners out there, you're gonna have a large population that doesn't like metal purely because of the vocals. That is like the number one thing that turns every single listener off from metal is the screaming, the brutality, the
It was guttural. Yeah, it's
that
guttural.
they just don't. I don't understand what they're saying, and while I remember there was a time that I thought the same thing when I was a kid. Um, Eventually I grew to understand it. And yes, there are some artists that I don't particularly like the way they do their screaming or their growling. But then there are others that I really do enjoy. And I may not know what they're saying, but it fits the sound and it's without
say.
it, it wouldn't work.
No.
So
Which is why I kind of have an aversion to pop death metal bands. Like,
Mm.
I know, not to mention any names. Okay, I'll mention it. Like Evanescence, I can't take them.
Right.
Please get out. I can't take them
What about-
because the two things don't fit together for me.
What
You
about
know?
like Nightwish?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I don't know how to feel about them, but
Yeah, it's kind of like that operatic type of.
yeah, Evergrey, right? Those
Mm.
guys, the same thing. I'm kind of in that. I put them all in that classification.
That might be a
of
good
more of
introduction. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I think it's for me. I think to really it be a true metal experience, and again, it's just my opinion. So
Mm.
people don't backlash on me, but to
All
be a
emails sent
speak up,
to
yeah, to the death threats. I think for me, it's really about the cohesiveness of the power, the sound that you get,
Mm.
right? Something Aaron was just talking about. Like it's true. It's true. Like for me, it's not artistic. Like metal is not. If I had to define what metal music is, it has nothing to do with the artistry. For me, it has everything to do with the physical power of the sound coming out of the band, and that force that hits you in your body. You know, like it just literally you feel it resonate in you. You walk away from a show and you're like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I still feel those frequencies.
Yeah.
And for me, the vocals have to do that too. And when you start mixing the artistic operatic stuff in, it's great. It's musically it's great, artistically it's great, but for me, it breaks the definition of what metal is for me.
Right.
I'm done.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of people like me. I mean, I'm not a metal guy in any way. Like I've listened to some, but I'm not with it. But I feel like a gateway metal band might be a useful introduction. It's like I would never try to make somebody fall in love with like jazz, for instance, by making them listen to Charlie Parker. I'd probably play, if they were into rock or funk, I'd have them listen to Herbie Hancock first and then kind of work my way backwards. But I wouldn't start with like the most extreme version of the genre. So
In this case, I strongly disagree. I think you need to just jump right in, Joe.
I'm sending some at the gates your way right now.
No, we'll just do it. Your first listening experience is Death Human. The album.
Human.
Yeah.
I'm writing
That's how Aaron did it for me.
Mhm. Well, yeah, it's true.
It's true. But you want to listen to Death Mill? Okay, here, listen to this track. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is interesting, you know. And then I became a big fan after listening to that record.
Yeah, I could recommend a lot. I mean, I say it this way. Most of the stuff that I listened to was definitely a period in my life, the 90s. Pretty much that's where it was, the 90s for me. I didn't listen to any metal past 2000. So anything within the 90s, I really that sound was really where it was at for me and continues to this day. There's nothing really out there right now that really excites me. Periphery, I really enjoy Periphery a lot. But then there's some clean vocals that I'm just not really used to anymore. I actually, from that podcast I listened to last night, there's a band that they suggested that actually Lamb of God just picked up called Discarnate. I listened to a little bit of them. I'm not really too. I was waiting for like the melodic stuff, and it never really came in. So I'm definitely listening to new stuff. I actually have a student currently right now that have as a recording student, and he every week comes in. Actually, he's probably listening. Hi, Hunter. He always helps with me, new stuff that's out, and we're always kind of chatting about new interesting stuff. So there's definitely stuff that's out there, but I think the roots of it, like death. I mean, they're the foundation.
Hunter, listen to Death Human.
Oh, he knows.
Oh, he does. He
Oh
listens
my
to it.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's my student. He's the same thing as any one of you guys. I've turned him on to all kinds of stuff. It's
It's fun.
great.
It's fun teaching metal too. I found to really enjoy after you, Aaron, turned me on to it as a style, and I really dived into it. When students would come to me later and say, "I want to do metal music," I'm like, "What kind?"
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Remember when I was living in Florida for a while, and I was teaching down there, and Florida Taylor probably can attest to this too. Huge death metal scene.
Oh my gosh,
down there. And I'd have students come in, they'd want to do death metal music, and that was a lot of fun. Because it does require a different focus part, teaching wise, to just the technical part of it.
Yeah, it's the technique. There's so many aspects to it that you just kind of have to really focus in on.
The attention to meter and rhythm and accenting and articulation and speed and right hand control. And it's like, right. It's really, really dialed in.
Yeah.
You focus as much on the rhythm guitar, chunking as you do to like lead lines when you're teaching metal. Like, if you had a new student coming and he knew how to play the guitar, like say me, for instance, what's the first thing you would do with me to get me on the path to being able to play?
Understand what's coming out of your guitar has to be something that's sonically powerful. See, that's how I define metal today. Like, I think anybody can play it.
But I mean, what is it? Just adding, playing your power chords, but adding that low fifth on the bottom.
Yeah, so stuff like that. So like
and
it would
the tone, is it a certain type of overdrive or fuzz versus overdrive?
Well, I don't know about that. Aaron might have more insight onto that, I think. But for me, I think it's more about, like, there are two aspects in teaching it. I can look at it technically speaking. So yeah, it would be like, let's tighten up the right hand. There are certain things you can do, like you lock your wrist or don't lock your wrist or angle your pick or don't do this or whatever, that give you those sort of tonalities. But I think at the end of it, it's really about like the sonic production. So like, all right, so now we're going to like invert this fifth. We're going to harmonize everything in inverted fifths. Or like, as like Aaron said earlier, we're going to structure it in such a way where we're not going to be moving from like this normal chord progression. We're doing something very different. Or in the case of Opeth, it may not even be a chordal movement. It might just be a rhythmic movement. It might be taking like one chord and then creating like a 7/4 signature or something out of it. So for me, it's like we can discuss all the musical aspects, but I think ultimately it's at the end of it, it's like, are we getting the power coming out of it? It's really hard to describe. It's funny you're asking me this question, because like I taught metal before, but to articulate it, I'm not sure if there's a verbal way to do it. I just I just kind of present it to the student and say, here's what the feel is. Here is what the effect of it is. And for me, that's I think where it becomes really interesting, because you had Sabbath. They were, for me, were the early ideas of metal.
Oh yeah, they're the godfathers of metal.
Yeah, and even though Iommi was doing just power chord movements, right? The feel was amazing. It was just like the overall effect of it. So I don't think it's the raw materials per se. I think it's like sort of like the overall effect of the sound. Yeah. Sorry, Joe, if that's like an inadequate explanation for it, or what I would do with you, but that's
I'm fascinated by it. I think that anybody can, the more you start looking into a genre of music, the more you appreciate the intricacies of that music. And I feel like there's probably lots of other players listening in that maybe they're not metal metal fans, and I want to be convinced. And I think it's helpful to know the direction to go. I mean, knowing the right albums that you were mentioning earlier to listen to get you excited, and what's the first couple songs I should learn, things like that.
Well, I think that's just it. I think it's listening and replication to understand the style.
There's
like
so many styles out there of metal that it's really hard to kind of, man, it's even like with flattening of emotions. Yeah, it's a powerful track, but it may not be for everybody. I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, what if you're looking for something a little bit more melodic? In Flames,
Yeah.
Jester's Race
Jester's Race, Jester's Dance. Yeah.
Jester's Dance,
Yeah.
amazing tracks, and they're very melodic. Um, but you're going to find bands that don't use that melodic kind of feel. It's more just about pure power. So
I agree.
there's
I agree.
definitely many kinds of metal that you can listen to. If you're interested, you're going to find something out there that
We'll hook you for sure.
will hook you for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You just have to be open to it.
Yeah, I think anything's a gateway, Joe. I mean, if you're really like getting into metal, or any listeners getting into metal for the first time, like my perspectives and viewpoints today have been strictly relegated for death metal. You know, it's like that for me is a defining part of the genre. But if you want to like expand metal, as Aaron just said, into the wide bandwidth, I think any genre can be a gateway, you know, band in. And then technically speaking, I just think it's really about your attack. So, and the only way to really learn that is just to learn a piece.
Yeah.
You know, but that's how we did it. Just, you know, like, let's learn a track. And I found, this is interesting too, we have to wrap this up soon, but I found that, like, for me, it's easier to learn and teach metal by ear than it is in notation. So, like, you know how we, as guitar teachers, we love to present pieces in tablature or standard notation and teach it through the text per se. For me, metal is the one genre that I think it really comes through osmosis more. Like, you get it when you just play the track on a recorder or something, and you emulate and you try to get the feels, right, Aaron? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would, to some extent, unless you're listening to something like speed metal, or they're going through some crazy. I mean, I know that there's been many times when I've, you know, thrown the song into a program where I have half
it down,
and I'm like, what is he doing? Like, I can't figure. And then you have to figure out the hand position of where it actually is.
Sure.
So yeah, there's definitely times where it's a pain to actually try to figure out what's going on. But when you are given a lick like whatever it is, Fade to Black by Metallica, or whatever it is, some kind of iconic riff, to actually kind of hear that and then actually to figure it out on the guitar, or whatever instrument you're playing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I mean, that's, you know, from when we were kids, that's it. And, you know, you heard a riff and you're like, I need to figure out how that's played. And that goes for, you know, tons of guitar riffs, but something about, you know, metal, and that the way that it's structured and the sound, that minor sixth, that minor third, that's just kind of like, ooh. And then you throw the flat two in there and it's like, whoa, okay, now we're talking evil.
They break a lot of harmonic rules, and I feel that, like, when I was a kid, this was important too. There was no other genre that developed my ear like metal music did. Like, I really feel it was really essential for ear training. So any student today who wants to get into metal, it's definitely a viable genre for developing a really powerful ear, because just in the frequency ranges and the intervals you're talking about, like, you can study classical, you can study jazz, but don't discount metal. It's got a lot of angles that are really good for the ear.
Yeah. And there's certain bands that use certain types of sounds over and over again. I mean, Metallica with Alien over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, right. Or Chuck, he would do a lot of Locrian stuff.
Yep, absolutely. You have Avenged Sevenfold, who uses a lot of harmonic minor. They just kind of fit into their molds.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of cool. I mean, metal's awesome. It's great. And it takes a lot of aspects from a lot of other genres, blues and jazz for sure. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I really enjoy metal.
I love it. I'm gonna go listen to one right now.
I have so many questions that I want to know, like, about death metal or metal. I just, like, don't. I was telling Aaron, like, I don't.
Oh, it's fun. It's a good style. I love it. Aaron turned me onto it. I was a metal fan growing up, but, like, we're talking thrash and speed. The whole death metal thing was something more I discovered later, like in my 20s.
I feel like I just haven't. I've like learned some like lead metal techniques
Technology.
and like Ingve and
Oh no.
but I've just not really gotten into the
It's
actual genre. I think when the singing turns me off or
Yeah,
screaming.
well, yeah. Although, listen to Opeth. You'd like those guys, Opeth, because Michael Ackerfeld, the vocalist for Opeth, is
Mhm.
such a talented singer. The one album you want to listen to will be Deliverance.
Okay.
That's the record. In fact, do you know Porcupine Tree?
Mm-mm.
You know that band, Porcupine Tree? Who the hell's the guy? Name's escaping me now. Prog band, but the he's sort of like the Trent Reznor of the prog world. But this band Porcupine Tree, and he produced that album Deliverance by Opeth, and there's so many prog elements in it. But anyway, the point is that like it goes from like in a couple of verses they're doing the ooh, that kind of thing, to the next thing he's doing, he's like really like singing melodic kind of stuff. You know, he's like his voice, he's really good at it reminds me of like King Diamond back in the 80s, like these, you know, huge ranges of stuff that, you know, he can manipulate his voice. So I don't think everything in death metal today is the sort of like the guttural thing. They're changing a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Isn't Megadeth? I'm trying to remember.
They're not death metal though. They're just heavy metal. But Megadeth, yeah.
I feel like he's got a good voice.
Oh yeah,
If I'm thinking of the right guy.
Dave Mustaine. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's got that really kind of thing like that, you know. And he's just
Maybe
and the
I'm
way he
thinking of a different
sings.
person.
Yeah, Joe, we have to give you a metal education. This might have to turn into like a 3-parter, you know,
Yeah.
go through the history of metal, you know.
I watched this video this morning on the history of metal in one song, and the guy
Oh,
was like jamming, and he like went from blues rock to heavy rock to death metal to thrash metal to glam metal to
yeah,
new metal. There's all kinds
new
of stuff.
metal. There's new American heavy metal. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, just the categories alone, crazy.
Yeah.
Death metal is interesting though, because for me, it's the one metal form that's about power, like sonic power. We're not talking like artistry, just being in a room, feeling the frequencies hit you. It's like unforced. I mean, it's crazy. I've never experienced anything like it. And Taylor, there's actually a metal fest here in Maryland. And Taylor, I remember frequently talking to him, like he would come down to this metal fest like every year, and it's like just this couple of days of that stuff. And I was always thinking, like, how did you sit there and take just sonically the force of all that stuff, because it's like it's incredible.
Yeah, like all day.
Yeah, I'm just yeah. I mean, like most metal's loud, but death metal is like it's like anvil in your chest.
Yeah, that's what I need to do. I need to go to
You got to go to a show, yeah, and just kind of see one. And
I've seen like local metal bands play, but not a lot, and maybe they weren't like necessarily that good.
Well, it's a tough style. It's a hard style to kind of get.
Rhythmically, it's
incredible. Do you know of Gene Hoglan, the Atomic Clock?
No.
Look this guy up, drummer Gene Hoglan. He played with Death on a few records, but he's a famous death metal drummer. This guy, probably for me, is probably one of the most talented, if not most technical drummers of all time. He's open-handed, so that means he plays. I don't know if you know what that means, but so instead of like the cross hand drumming, he plays open, like Carter Bruford from Dave Matthews Band plays.
Yeah,
and everything with Gene is measured, and he's fast, and he's precise, and it's like really articulate, and he'll just rock you. I mean, like you listen to him, you're like, whoa, like he'll do stuff on just around the cymbals, just little accented phrases that are like metrically perfect. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
I
listened to this Slayer song yesterday. It was so badass. The end of it, the drums were like just going nuts, but I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was like something very evil sounding.
That's their entire catalog.
That Slayer song was called Criminally Insane from the 1986 album Rain in Blood.
Yeah.
It was so intense.
That really kind of thing like that.